All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Unlimited Minds. Today, my guest is Collette Wayne, and I'm going to hand it over to her to do an introduction. Collette, tell us about yourself.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. I'm so excited. Well, what most people know about me is that I have a doctorate in animal welfare and animal behavior. And I spent 25 years working in the field of animal and environmental wellness with amazing partners, brilliant minds, people at Stanford and San Diego Zoo. And I even worked as this high-level government official, creating environmental wellness solutions for our nation's most valuable resources. I'm known as a wellness expert, but what most people don't know about me is that I was a wellness expert with just about the worst wellness imaginable. I spent a lifetime with a disease that I like to call grass is greener ascites. It's also known as I'll be happy when ascites. I don't know if anyone can relate. When you're a high achiever, it can often be masked as this goal-oriented, lifestyle. But for me, it all came to a head in 2016 when I really had thought I achieved everything, like my moving goalposts, my moving target. I had finally gotten there. And I genuinely couldn't think of another goal that I had for my perpetually moving goalpost. And then suddenly my 20-year marriage ended and I had some significant health issues. Those were the straws that broke the camel's back for me. And I began having these crippling panic attacks. I remember being curled up on the bathroom floor, just gasping for air. I couldn't breathe. Like the weight of the world was on my shoulders, and I didn't know how I was going to get out of it. I was a single mom with 3 kids. My beautiful Instagram family completely gone. My physical health gone. My mental health totally gone. My beautiful home, my career that I had worked my entire life for, it was all gone. I went from making 6 figures to being on food stamps in the blink of an eye. And to be honest, I didn't really know how I was going to survive. Can you hear me, Sarah? Okay. I almost took my life that night. And while I'm so thankful I didn't, it was only because I didn't want my 3 children to find my body and to have that trauma endured upon them. And it was in that aftermath of losing everything that I had worked so hard to build, everything that I thought would bring me happiness, I realized that there was nothing external that could ever bring me happiness if I didn't first find it within myself. To be honest, I didn't even know what happiness looked like, and I didn't know who I was without all of the things that the world told me I needed to obtain in order to be happy. We have a tendency to make our own wellness an afterthought, or to put our own happiness on hold until we achieve. I'm wondering if any of your listeners might be able to relate to that. Have any of you ever felt the weight of the world on your shoulders, or felt like you couldn't breathe? Have any of you ever made your happiness a moving target? It was the start of my own journey to find my own wellness, to find peace in my heart, and realize that I needed to have that peace regardless of my external circumstances. And it took me losing everything that I thought actually mattered to find out who I was created to be. And
How did you do that? How
It
did
was
you
in
do
those
that, Collette?
dark nights that I realized that all of these points in my life had created me, the essence of me. And that even though it had seemed like all of these targets were moving, each one of those little pieces made up a part of me that was really part of my soul. And
Yeah.
I discovered in those really deep, dark nights and a lot of soul searching, I discovered what really brought me joy and what
You know what we
really,
call that? We call it the dark night of the soul, right?
yeah, I
Yeah.
had a lot of those, a lot.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. And
And
now
then
I realize it's my purpose to help people find and become who they were created to be rather than just trying to obtain all of these goals.
tell me something. You know, we talk about these moments, and I've had these moments as well, where you feel like the world is ending, everything's crashing around you, and you go into that deep, dark place where it feels like, okay, why am I even here? How do you get out? I have a whole story. I have a whole course about how I got out
Yeah.
of it. You know,
Yeah.
that's what I teach. But I want to hear from you because we all do it a little bit differently. And maybe there's someone out there who needs what you have to say about it. So tell me, how did you pull yourself out of that?
Well, the cool thing about my background is my background is animal welfare, right? And you can't ask animals how they're doing. Animal welfare is the scientific study of like an internal state of a being that can't tell you what their internal state is, right? You can't ask a lion if it's happy or if it's okay. You can't ask a puppy how it feels. And so you have to understand this concept called telos. And in animal welfare, telos means the essence of who you were created to be, the tigerness of a tiger, the lionness of a lion, the pigness of a pig. And in animal welfare, there's, there's different components of wellness. There's physical wellness, spiritual wellness, intellectual wellness, mental wellness. And each of those is really important, but which one is more important? And in animal welfare, there's a lot of values-based decisions. So for me, I really kind of went back to my roots and I understood that this concept of telos is the essence of who I was created to be. And if in animal welfare that was really important, I figured out I should probably know what my telos is. If this is like the fundamental foundation of animal welfare, but I don't know what my own telos is,
What does that stand for? Is it an acronym, Colette?
it's not. It's actually a philosophical term and it means ultimate purpose or aim. And this brilliant animal welfare philosopher kind of brought it in to the animal welfare world. And it was like, we can all say different things matter, but what really matters is that if what you were created to be can't be experienced, then your welfare is compromised. And so for
So
me, I
it's the
had to actually
humanness,
go, yeah, like,
humanness of the human.
yeah, but not just the humanness of the human, because humans have a telos, but you have a telos, and
Ah,
I have a telos, and we
ah,
all have something that makes us tick. We all
mm,
have something that is like our golden light shining through. And
mm.
it was part of us from very early. I believe it was gifted to us upon our entrance into this world. And a lot of times we get stuff thrown at us and all of these things kind of hide that light, hide that telos. And so for me, the way that it wasn't an overnight journey to find my wellness. It was quite an intensive, almost 7 years, to be honest, putting it all together and figuring out like, who am I? What makes me tick? What really brings me joy? And I had to do a lot of soul reflection. And now I get to help other people find and become who they were created to be. So it's like,
Amazing.
yeah, this whole world of animal wellness, environmental wellness, and then human wellness, and how we're all connected.
Connected.
And I get to use this perspective from animal welfare and from environmental welfare to help people understand how connected we are, and that it's really more than just about us. Like, we're part of an ecosystem.
So, would you say that an understanding of how we are all connected is an ingredient towards finding our wellness and our healing?
Absolutely. So in ecology, there's this concept of ecosystems, right? And so what I realized in my journey is that I'm actually an ecosystem wellness scientist. So by understanding how we are connected to not only our earth, but to the animals in our world that are under our care, the animals that we eat, even if you're not even if you are a vegetarian, the the plants that you eat are influenced by the things that are going on in this earth, by the toxins going into our soil, by the air that we breathe. And not to mention, if you're not a vegetarian or a vegan, and the food that you eat, that what about the food that the animals are eating? What about what they're ingesting? What about the air that they're breathing? So understanding how our wellness is really connected to our Earth's wellness and to the animals in our Earth's wellness, and understanding how we're all kind of integrated into that ecosystem, and understanding what our unique little niche is right in that ecosystem, because everything has a niche.
I've always held this belief that each one of us is important, and we are important only and solely because we are. And so when, like, I exist, therefore I am.
Yes.
And therefore I am worthy, and therefore that's all I need. So when you talk about niche, we all have our niche. How does, if you look at it from this point of view, I'm thinking, okay, how do these two concepts connect? Do you have a
Yeah.
thought on that?
Yeah, we actually, I remember in one of my very first classes in graduate school, I took this animal welfare class, and it was all philosophical. And we did all of these exercises to understand, like, intrinsic versus extrinsic value, right? Does something have value just because it exists? Does something have value only because it provides contribution? And in reality, in nature, everything is contributing and growing. And if it's not contributing or growing, it's dying. And so I feel like humans are no exception. We were absolutely created to contribute some function to this world, whether it be your career, or just the fact that you're here loving another soul. Maybe that love that you're providing to another soul is exactly what they needed to do something else. Like, there's these catalysts of goodness that can happen just by you being in existence. And so it's such a it like, I could talk about this kind of stuff all day, because it's such an interesting thought of, like, I remember we would have these discussions of, like, well, why is it okay to feed snakes mice but not kittens?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you said, I'm going to go to the store and buy some kittens for my snake, people would freak out, right? But why is the life of a kitten more important than the life of a mouse? And it's like all of these different questions that really just come back down to your own ethics and your own values.
Ooh, we could have a fun discussion right there about that one.
I know. I know. And I mean, it really all does come down to our own values, but each of us, I believe, was placed on this earth to find and become some sort of contribution to this earth. And it's what, in my experience and in the kind of science of happiness that I've discovered, and I went on a pretty deep dive into the science of happiness. And in reality, it really comes down to contribution. Being able to help others is part of why we're here. We're social beings.
So now you're reminding me of the concept of life purpose. Is that what you're talking about? Kind of, sort of?
Yeah. That to me
Yeah,
is telos, the
yeah.
ultimate name. And the cool thing that I feel about telos is that it can change and it can be different. Like your telos as a child is different than your telos as a young adult. And your telos as a young adult is different than midlife or towards the latter part of your life. And then again in old age, right? Like, so it's not this moving target. It's about being who you were created to be at every step of the journey.
Mm. And what role does our power of decision making make in all of this?
Mm,
Hmm.
that is such a good question. I have really grappled with that concept
Uh-huh.
of like,
Yeah.
what if I didn't make this choice? What if I made another
Yeah.
choice?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I believe that there's not one right choice. I believe that
Mm.
there are a lot of possibilities for your life and that you can make every single choice that you make meaningful. And
Mhm.
even if by the world's definition, it's a bad choice, you can still learn and grow from it. Um, a really good example is I just rescued these two puppies. And like I do a lot of rescue and rehabilitation. And I have a nonprofit that helps people find and become who they were created to be using animals, connecting them with animals and connecting them with nature. And so I do a lot of rescue. And in fact, I help a lot of disabled veterans with, training their own service animals and helping people train assistance dogs or things of that nature. And so I saw these puppies that they were in really bad shape and I couldn't say no. And I knew it was a terrible time. I didn't have the time, I didn't have the energy, I didn't have the capacity to put into these puppies. And I got them home and they were sick. And it's been quite a rough journey. And I already have a lot on my plate. And then these puppies needed like full-time care. And I wound up having to euthanize one. And I was heartbroken. I went into this like, oh, why did I do this? I knew this wasn't a good choice. And then I had some beautiful insight from my coach who was like, Collette, you made this choice because that's part of who you are. You can't let a soul suffer and just walk by. And so maybe you made this choice because you needed to have that understanding. Maybe you needed to grieve. Maybe you needed this in your life, but whatever it is, you already made the choice. So now make the best of it. Right? What are you going to do with this choice that you made? What lesson are you going to take out of it? So even if you make a bad choice, and I put that in quotation marks, you can learn from it, you can grow from it, and you can use it to help your ultimate purpose in some way. It's just about your outlook.
So true. Our perspective, our outlook really defines everything. It's how you see it. Two people can see things very differently, right? Even in this example of the two little puppies, there are people who will just walk away and say, no, not doing that. And here you are, you took them on knowing that it was not going to be easy for you,
Yeah.
given your own situation and given their situation.
Yeah.
So, no two people ever see the same thing the same way. So, Colette, you said that you help people using animals to
Yeah.
recover or heal their emotional self. How
Mhm.
does that work?
Well, like I said before, I think we were created for connection.
Mm,
And connection, like we infants can actually die if they don't feel love, right? Like there are a lot of studies that have demonstrated, especially like back in the day, there were some Russian orphanage studies that showed that like without love and connection, people do not thrive. They decline very quickly. But a lot of times when we're in this experience of being hurt by people, it's hard to connect with people. And animals have this way of creating this connection within us. For some people, it's nature. But in my experience, a lot of people who have never felt unconditional love,
Yes.
or who have never felt acceptance, or who have walked around this earth just feeling judged over and over, like that connection with another soul can be part of their healing process. And so ultimately, my goal actually is to have a wellness center that incorporates human and animal wellness, essentially a sanctuary where people who have been hurt and animals who have been hurt can come together and help heal each other, and then kind of go back out and into the world and be catalysts for more healing and more love. And so I personally do a lot of my coaching with using examples from animal biology and understanding the biology of the brain, understanding the biology of behavior, because really we are animals too. And the biology is quite similar. And that was one of the biggest factors in my own recovery, is understanding the biology, especially the biology of my own mental health, and understanding the biology and the science of what was going in my brain. And that, like, I was this animal trainer, right? I've trained everything from mice to seals and sea lions. And I was like, wait a second, I can train my own brain? Like, I can take my brain out for a walk, just like I take my dogs out for a walk. I can reward my own brain to actually increase the behavior that I want, rather than like experiencing behaviors that I don't want to do. Because I think we've all suffered from that, right? Like, we know what to do, but we just can't seem to do it, right? Like, it's easy, but not simple. Or rather, it's simple. No, wait.
Basically, it is simple. It is simple, but we overthink it. We overthink
Yeah.
it, and then we make it hard.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
We totally do. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so true. Our animals are so unconditional. I remember a story that I read, Oliver Twist, very famous book, and there's a character, I don't know if you read Oliver Twist, but there's a character in there called Fagin, and he beats up on his dog. And he kicks his dog, and the dog still comes running to him, wagging his tail, licking his face. And I always like that, really, in that entire book, I have forgotten, literally. I read that book at school. I have forgotten what the book is, but I remember that.
Yeah.
That animals are so forgiving, so
are.
loving, so unconditional, that yes, truly, connecting at that unconditional level, I feel that humans forget how to do that, because we make decisions, we have judgments, we have opinions, and all of that, we don't realize it, but all of those opinions and judgments that we have about people and things subtract the love, the flow of love. It's like Abraham Hicks. I don't know if you listen to Abraham Hicks. They are my teachers and gurus. So what they say is that there's a faucet of love, and with every judgment you make, you're closing that. When you're born, the faucet is open, it is flowing fully. And then with every judgment you make, every negative opinion you have about something or someone, you're closing that faucet little by little by little by little by little.
That's such a good analogy.
I know, right? Yeah, I love that analogy. And so to me, being unconditional, so we get to this point in our life where the constriction of the flow of love, because the faucet's been, almost shut completely, that feels like suffocation. And that's when people like you and me go looking for, okay, I'm suffocating in my body.
Literally
Literally suffocating. I need to learn how to open this faucet again so that I can start breathing again, so that I can start flowing. That was natural. It was natural for me to flow love, and something unnatural stopped it.
Exactly. I am reminded of when during COVID we did a puppy. We fostered a mama dog, and she had 9 puppies. And we went through the whole process of getting them adopted and everything, but it was quite a journey. So we had these 10 additional dogs in our home, and there was some hard stuff that was going on around our
Yes.
life at that
Yeah.
point. And the joy and
Mm-hmm.
just like laughter
Mm-hmm.
and innocence that these puppies brought into our world and into our life during that time. And it brought people together. It brought people who had not been able to communicate with each other, who had been at odds with each other for years, together in the same room, just with puppies,
Yeah.
and it triggered this idea for me, like, man, if we could come together with so much adversity and just like sit around the room and laugh with these puppies, what kind of healing could that bring for
Oh,
people who are
absolutely.
truly hurting? Like, what
Yeah.
about having group therapy sessions in a puppy playpen, right?
Yeah.
Like, what about
Oh,
actually being able to because they don't judge us in
they don't
any
judge.
way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that openness, that unconditional love, that and really truly what I believe is a very spiritual connection,
Mm.
um just turns that faucet on.
Yeah, exactly. Because you forget in that moment of connection with someone who is unconditional. And you can even see that. I mean, it's not just animal babies, it's just even a human baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
It brings forth that you just go all the way, let's open this all the way,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things in our lives is to learn to keep it open, you
Yeah.
know, learn to keep it open. But unfortunately, things happen in our life. There's integrity crises, there's cheating, there are all these things that are going on in the world around us that they program us, or they condition us to start closing down that faucet.
Yeah, completely. And I mean, I think that's really easy in this world because this world is not fair, right? There's a lot of injustice. And I know now that part of the essence of my soul is to feel very deeply. And sometimes my feeling, my emotion can make other people uncomfortable, right?
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
yeah,
I know
right.
what you're
And
talking about. Yeah.
yeah, but like I know that I was created to care deeply about those injustices, and not to just care, but to actually be a voice for them. And
Mhm.
and I have been told almost my entire life that I'm like too much, right? I'm too
Mhm.
loud. I talk too much. I need to tone it down. And
Mhm.
in reality, it was during a lot of those deep, dark nights of the soul that I realized that my voice was gifted to me so that I could be a voice for those who couldn't speak,
Mm.
and to be a voice for the injustice that I care about. Because I mean, the list of injustices, like,
Very long. Yes.
so great,
Yes.
but the ones that I care about, to be a voice for those, to give
Mhm.
a voice to those who don't have one. And
Mhm.
so while my too much or too loud voice, I even remember in grad school, somebody told me, like, down the hall, they were like, man, Collette, your voice carries. And I perceived that in the moment as a negative. I perceived
Negative.
that
Yes.
as
Yeah.
like, you're
Yeah.
telling me to be quiet.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, wait a second, my voice carries. That means,
And it's important. Yes.
yeah,
And you know what I've learned, because I call myself the one with the bleeding heart. Anything's going on around the world, my heart is bleeding for those people. But I almost had to learn, Colette, to stop bleeding in order to start helping. because when
Oh,
when you're bleeding, you're draining yourself of the energy that you need to actually help those people.
oh my gosh, that's so spot on.
Uh,
So spot on. And that's
seriously.
what happened to me. I was this like high level government official and I had really dedicated my life
Yeah.
to helping these causes.
Yeah.
And then I lost my own wellness, but in reality, I had never found it. In reality, I had never actually realized that I had to put that oxygen mask
Oh,
on
exactly.
first
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
order
Yeah.
to be able to let my voice be a
Yeah.
voice for those.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had to get well. I
Yeah.
had to find my own wellness
Exactly. That's right.
before I could actually come into helping the way that I wanted to be helped or wanted to
Exactly.
be helping people. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly, because you're not good to anyone unless you are, you have that energy and you can bring those solutions forward. So that was a big lesson I had to learn in my life. And the parallel I draw for it is that, like if you're going to be a surgeon, you've got to be able to take the sight of blood, and so so
Yeah.
you can't panic, you can't start grieving, you can't start hurting because then your hands will tremble and you'll not be able to complete the procedure. So that's how I had to psych myself or talk to myself to say if you're really going to be of assistance, you've got to stop bleeding.
Yeah. And that's kind of where it comes of like serving from an empty cup versus
Yeah,
serving from your overflow.
exactly. That's
A-
right. That's
And that
right.
was where like I had to do a lot of soul searching to realize that my happiness, like what brings me joy, and like that's not a waste of time. That's
No,
not
not at
frivolous.
all. Not at
It's,
all.
and I think as mothers, we often have a tendency to put our own needs last. And whether it be this like martyrism of like society or what society has told us mothers or women should be, it's like you give and you give and you give and you meet everybody else's needs. And then what happened to me is that I had spent a lifetime doing that and
Mm-hmm.
realized that I had never
Drained
focused
yourself completely. Yeah.
on what I needed to be
Mm-hmm.
well. And
Mm-hmm.
like it took me, I literally was 38 and on full-blown disability. Like
Mm-hmm.
I lost my livelihood. And I was like, oh, wait a second here. Like, how is this my meaningful, like this can't be the end, right? Like this can't be how I go out. Like I put all of this time into my education, literally more than 113,000 hours as a
For sure.
college student, right?
Yeah.
This can't be the end of it. And so I knew deep down that I had this other purpose, but I had to spend the time getting well. And
Mm-hmm.
there was no shortcutting that. There was
No,
no
there's
like
no.
rushing that, or
Yeah.
as we hear often, there's no microwaving your own
So
transformation.
tell me something. How did you manage your thoughts? Because some people can just go through that and say, okay, I can't do this,
Yeah.
and then just accept defeat and never come out of it.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
I had some really good tangible exercises that, I went through a lot of therapy, a lot of personal development, and I learned some really specific tangibles of like understanding what is and what is not it within my control. And I would literally make these spreadsheets because I would have racing thoughts and, these panic and overwhelm. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would make these spreadsheets actually of like, what's the issue? Okay, the issue is X. And in X, what do I have control over? And I would write down all of the things that I actually had control over. And I mean, I'm like literally spreadsheets here. Like I was like, and now I can do this in my head, right? But at the time, it was so new to me because I really felt like everything was on my shoulders and it was all my responsibility. And I really had to start to learn this process of knowing what is within my sphere and what is not. And so I would tangibly do these like exercises of, this is the issue that I'm facing. And then I would say, what can I do? And I would write down what I can do. And then the rest, I would actually have these like thought processes of like putting it in a box and putting it on the shelf. And I had this amazing therapist, and he gave me this analogy once, and he was like, I'm spiritual. And he told me, Collette, if you want God to work on something, he can't work on it when you're working on it too. You got to put it in the box, and you got to leave it on the shelf for a little bit. And then you got to let him do what he needs to do. And if you keep taking the box back down, he's just going to say, okay, go for it. Like, have your box. Like, if you want to work on it, go ahead. But when you can work on what is within your control, which is like, okay, I'm going to take the box down. I'm going to work on what's within my control. And then I'm going to put the box back up on the shelf, and I'm going to surrender the outcome. And surrendering the outcome, that was a huge step for me.
I know.
Like,
That is the biggest step of all. Yeah,
here's
yeah,
what's
yeah.
within my control,
Yeah.
and the rest of it is not. And then like, that's okay.
Yeah.
And to know that, like, I think also for me, it was like, I've experienced, I have not had an easy life. I had a pretty rough childhood, and I was on my own at 16. And, you know, I had navigated all of that. And this deep, dark night of the soul was worse than anything I had ever experienced, even that. Right. But on the other side of that, it was like, oh, well, if I have done that, then I know I'm going to be okay. So it was compiling the evidence that I know that I can get through anything. That it was like, and now I literally have an evidence reel, like in my Evernote. And I'm like, when I'm struggling, I'm like, okay, wait, I remember this. I remember this. I have to actually go and tangibly look at it to remind myself that like, no, you've done really good things, and you can do hard things. And that's something that I tell myself a lot. My best friend is a doctor, and we've kind of been on our healing journey. She's an actual medical doctor. I'm not a medical doctor, but we've been on this healing journey together. And a lot of times we just have to remind ourselves, this is hard, but you can do hard things.
Yes.
And so having
I mean, you did your PhD. That's hard.
Right. And that's actually been one of the things that I've relied on a lot. Like, if I could do that, because I didn't just do my PhD. I did my PhD while having 3 kids in grad school.
Oh my goodness.
And so like having 3 kids in grad school and getting your PhD. And then the last year of my PhD, I was working full time for the government. So I was working full time for the government. I had, you know, would go home and write my dissertation. I was like working, you know, 18 to 20 hours a day. My husband at the time would literally just bring me food at the computer. Thankfully, I had amazing support, because if I didn't have that support, like I wouldn't have been able to do it. But it was like relying on that evidence. Okay, wait, I've done hard things in the past. I can do hard things again. What do I need? I need a support system. What do I need? I need, you know, like all of these different things. And now I ask, you know, that's one of the questions I ask my kids a lot, is because it's not what can I do for you? It's how can I support you in becoming who you were created to be?
Oh, that is such a wonderful shift of perspective. Instead of saying, how can I help? What do you need in terms of support? That's a beautiful segue. Absolutely.
And that, you know, just in the parenting realm, like that has relieved so much off of me, because I was literally living in this state of perpetual needing perfectionism. And, you know, as a parent, like perfectionism just doesn't exist.
I was just going to ask you, how does a perfectionist let go control? Because,
right? Like you're
that's
never
your,
ever
yeah,
gonna get like, for me it was a breaking point. And often those breaking points, those trigger points where it's just like, I just can't take this anymore, is what really leads to our breakthrough, right? But it's that surrendered action in that. And I was having some serious issues with perfectionism as a parent and
yeah.
as a mother, and realizing that no matter what I did, it was never going to be the right thing. Like I could not please everybody. I was living with
That's right.
all of these rules, like all over me. And I realized that they were not serving me or my children well. And I had this epiphany that, you know what? I was gifted with the role of being their mother for a reason. There is something that I have inside of me that was aligned with my children, and whatever brought us together, whatever gifted me that with the role and this, critical job of being their mother, it wasn't based on everybody else's rules. It was
Mm-hmm.
based on what I had inside. And so if I'm going to figure out how to do this, I better connect and figure out what feels good to
So
me.
you're talking about the Coletteness of Collette.
Absolutely. And really, like I actually had a conversation with my son and was like, look, I'm not going to parent by anybody else's rules anymore. I'm not, like, what works for you is different than what works for your siblings. And like it just can't be the same all the time. What we need to do is work together. My goal as a parent now is to help you find and become who you were created to be, not who I want you to be, not who the world tells you to be, but who you were actually created to be. So how can me in my light help you find your light?
Ooh, I
And
love those words. Beautiful words. And you
yeah,
make me think about, how we talk about collaboration in leadership, collaborative leadership. This is
yeah,
collaborative parenting.
right. And
This is beautiful.
obviously they need guidance and they need structure, and it's not a free for all. It's not like, oh yeah, you just get to go and do whatever you want, because that
Well,
isn't
I
what's
can have a
them,
discussion with you
right?
about that because I teach parenting from a whole different point of view, which is let your children find their own guidance instead
Yeah,
of you being their guidance.
yeah. And but I do feel like, there's parameters, right? There's goalposts. Like a
Oh,
good
Colette,
example.
now you're entering into territory where I can really take you on.
Okay. Well, I do think that we have guides, right? Like we have
Yes.
guides, and our
And children
job.
do as well. Children do
Yeah.
as well. So instead of we replacing their guidance with ours, let them find their own.
Yeah.
At least that's my philosophy. So I've been someone who does not make rules, doesn't set boundaries. I let them decide what those priorities and boundaries are going to be. So
Wow, that's
that's
really
a whole
interesting.
other
I think we
that's a
could
whole
have,
other podcast.
yeah, yeah, I think it is. Because, I very much, I think, you asked, how does a perfectionist let go of control? And I wish that I had learned these lessons before I had children, for sure. But
For sure.
definitely when my children
Oh,
were really young.
yeah.
But now I didn't, and therefore now I get to,
Change things. Change a
change
couple of things. Yeah.
and model that, though.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
model that, like,
That's right. We
maybe
have
I
to
didn't
model it.
make the best choices, and here's
Absolutely.
how you can pivot. And, like,
Absolutely.
life is about pivoting.
Yeah,
Life is about, like, what can you learn from what you've experienced,
for
and then
sure.
pivot.
So tell me something, Colette. In this entire journey of wellness and learning all these things that you've learned, what are some of the things that really stand out that you would like to share with the audience as, here's the top 3 or 4 or 5 things that have really come out of my experience. And if you want to learn more about these 5 things, come and join me and, connect with me and I'll teach you more. What would those things be?
Well, definitely understanding telos, right? Understanding who you were created to be, and then becoming that person. I like to empower people with the tools, because that was one of the issues I had as well. Like, I knew intellectually who I was created to be,
Yeah.
but I didn't actually feel prepared with the tools to become
Oh,
that.
that's a
Yeah.
big one.
And
Yes.
so finding who you were created to be and empowering people with the tools to become it.
Mm,
I believe that wellness has pillars. And
mhm.
for me, the pillars of wellness are physical, mental, spiritual, and intellectual. And focusing on all of those pillars is critical to finding whole self wellness. So
Amazing.
whole
Yes.
self wellness is really important. And I don't think that it's balance, because balance is a facade. I think it's
Hmm.
harmony.
I agree
It's
with you.
harmony,
Yes.
right?
It's
And
harmony. Yes.
yeah. And I really believe that with scarcity, you can never have wellness. But with
Yes.
wellness, with an abundance of wellness, you can never have scarcity.
Mm, so true.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, that's like overlapping with what I teach in law of attraction and manifesting concepts.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's all about abundance, and a
Yeah.
scarcity mindset will affect every aspect of your life.
It absolutely does. And so I really help people train their brains. Train
Mm.
your brain, like train your brain with Dr. Wayne.
I like that.
Yeah, but it's true. It's really little things. It's little habits that we do. It's
Yes.
about rewarding the things that are working for us and recognizing that when something isn't working for you, it's not that you're a bad person.
Not at
It
all.
doesn't mean something about you. It just means it's not working and you need to have a new strategy.
Right.
And
And
so,
that's it. Yeah.
yeah, I help people find strategies to find their wellness.
Amazing. And so, how can people connect with you if they want to follow you, reach out to you?
Thank you for asking. My social media is Oceans of Grace 805. That's on both Facebook and Instagram. So Oceans of Grace is my nonprofit organization. So we also have a website that's under construction. Hopefully it will be up soon, but that's just oceansofgrace805.com. I am also on social media as Collette Wayne. So people can reach out and send me a message, and I can definitely help people find their own wellness.
And we'll put those links in the show notes for you. Is there any last piece of advice that you want to leave us with?
Well, like I said, a scarcity mindset, a scarcity mindset can never lead to an abundance of wellness. But with an abundance of wellness, you will never have scarcity again.
That's beautiful, beautiful words. Colette, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank
I'm
you,
so thrilled
Sarah.
that you came and you accepted my invitation. And for sure, we're going to have lots of discussions in the future as well.
Absolutely. I can't wait to hear more. I'm really interested in your parenting philosophy, because as a recovering controlling perfectionist, and I say recovering because it's a struggle I still face every single day. I definitely am always up for learning new strategies.
Well, I wrote a book, and actually, my daughter is the one who requested me to write the book on parenting. And it's called Is This Apple from My Tree? You know how we say the apple
Yeah.
doesn't fall far from the tree? So the book is called Is This Apple? Is this really my child? So it's
I
called
am
Is This
going to
Apple
order
from
that
My
book
Tree?
right now. I'm sure it's on Amazon, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
All
Yes,
right.
yes,
Well, I'm
yes.
going to order it right now.
Thanks again for being here, Colette. Bye for
Thank
now.
you. Have a great day.